it is that they are behaving the way they do with their balance sheet adjustments or interest rate adjustments, and how it is that they are planning on fighting inflation, and hearing the president talk about how it is that they're too late and don't know what they're doing, and all the confusion that goes along with monetary policy. We're here to clear that up for you, to give you a different perspective on what it is that's taken place within monetary policy, so that you can do the best that you can for yourself, positioning yourself in the most appropriate most appropriate manner possible for you. Now, I come across, sorry, I forgot to share the link down in the description for you guys. That's okay. This was April 3rd, 2025, a speech given by Philip Jefferson titled U.S. Economic Outlook and Central Bank Communications. Something very interesting that he was talking about inside of this speech. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just reading a little section of it, but I thought it was quite interesting because it really starts to talk about the credible threat theory and the idea that they use their words more than their actions. Now, this is something that I thought was just really good. It says here, former Chairman Ben Bernanke nicely summarized how important central bank communication is for the transmission of monetary policy by saying that monetary policy, quote, monetary policy is 98% talk and only 2% action. Now, I find that pretty interesting. So I went and checked out exactly where it is that he had said that. And it was this inaugurating a new blog. All right. This is dated March 30th of 2015, and directly saying this: when I was at the Federal Reserve, I occasionally observed that monetary policy is 98% talk and only 2% action. The ability to shape the ability to shape market expectations of future policy through public statements is one of the most powerful tools the Fed has. So this is him back in 2015. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago plus, was saying that the words, the statements, how it is that they put that out there is one of the most powerful tools they have. The downside for policymakers, of course, is that the cost of sending the wrong message can be high. Presumably, that's why my predecessor, Alan Greenspan, once told a Senate committee that as a central banker, he had, quote, learned, this is him quoting, Alan Greenspan quoting this, learned to mumble with great incoherence. Now, this is most amazing to think. 10 years ago, they had a whole different way of conducting themselves, but found that their communication was a very powerful tool, one that they could use, right? So let me get back to the speech here. Because it goes on to say this. This is really funny, all right? It says the Fed Today, the Fed communicates in a variety of ways, including policymakers' speeches. Hold on one second, guys. Let me make sure the Wi-Fi is turned off here. There we go. All right. Today, the Fed communicates in a variety of ways, including policymakers' speeches, Chair Powell's press conferences, and even through the Fed's social media channels. Clear and ample communication, however, has not always been the hallmark of the Fed. Right? Again, they didn't always communicate this way. They used to be very secretive. Then they learned that they could use their words. Their words became a very powerful tool. In the 1990s, cable news outlets would attempt to spot former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan walking into the building on the day of the FOMC meetings. So here it is, like all these, media people who are attention would watch Alan Greenspan as he was walking into the FOMC meeting. And the reason is commenters would pay careful attention to the size of his briefcase. This is what they were looking for some little get some information before the meeting. Right? They were looking for evidence of what it is that was going to be taking place with the interest rate adjustments prior to the Fed meeting. And they would do it by watching Alan Greenspan walk into the building of the FOMC. Commenters would pay careful attention to the size of his briefcase. The thought was that if the chair was advocating for a rate change, the briefcase would be bulging with documents to convince the fellow policymakers. So he would need like all this information in order to convince the policymakers that a rate change needed to take place. Former Greenspan seemed to value the element of surprise. In 1987, he famously quipped, quote, "If I seem unduly clear to you, you probably have misunderstood what I have said." This was Alan Greenspan and the way he communicated. Very unlikely you understood him, right? It seems if I seem unduly clear to you, you probably you must have misunderstood what I have said. And that's what Alan Greenspan was saying back then. So now this is important to understand, right? Because the Federal Reserve would be very likely to not tell any secrets about what it is that they were up to, what it is that they were strategizing about. They were very, very quiet. They did this on purpose because they had the idea that if they had surprised the markets, that would have a greater impact on monetary policy. As time went on, they realized that their words had a profound impact on markets, market perception, and the reality of the situation in which that they were looking for would come from the delivery of that message. Okay? Hold on one second here, son. So this is Inside the Briefcase, The Art of Predicting the Federal Reserve, July 1st, 2000. So it's not like, this is what, 25 years old now. The Federal Reserve is famously tight-lipped about its potential monetary policy moves. They are. They haven't been lately, but they were 25 years ago because they had a whole different way of conducting monetary policy back then. In desperate attempts to predict what Fed policymakers are thinking, market watchers occasionally resort to rather odd measures. For example, on the mornings when the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, meets to debate on interest rate policy, the media often focuses on images of the Fed chairman Alan Greenspan carrying his briefcase into the front door of the Federal Reserve building. If the briefcase bulging, so there goes the theory. It's full of evidence gathered by Greenspan to persuade other members of the FOMC to vote for higher interest rate target. If the briefcase is thin, then markets can relax because no change is likely. So again, they recognized back then that the media was paying attention to try and get information. 25 years ago, they recognized that. So it was no doubt to them that there was evidence of a preemptive attempt to position themselves before the meeting, before the interest rate adjustment. This is what they were recognizing, right? That swollen briefcase they could probably have conducted monetary policy literally by having the Fed chairman with an obvious briefcase just swelled with documents, right? And then that would send the signal to the markets that there was going to be an interest rate adjustment. Like they could literally do the same thing that they are doing now with all the talking points that are going on out there, with just literally one image of the Fed chairman walking in with a briefcase that is just swollen, just packed with documents. Then people could have the perception, then they would be like, oh, the briefcase is fat, right? And then the market perception would believe that there was going to be an interest rate adjustment. So now thinking about that briefcase scenario, that is what they are now using today, except on a massive scale, right? Instead of just having the people focus in on the briefcase, now there's all kinds of ways that they can communicate out there. Um, Now, as I have gone through the evidence and showing, I was going to read some more from this speech, but I think I'm just going to leave it right there because I think that's pretty good evidence as far as what it is that we need to use to communicate for what we're the discussion for today. God, I'm having a hard time talking. I think that's probably enough. You can go and find this speech for yourself. It's a recent speech given by Philip Jefferson, April 3rd, 2025, U.S. Economic Outlook and Central Bank Communications. We'll probably cover this particular speech in a members only live stream at some point. But I think it's really important to understand this. To understand that they are using their words to communicate policy actions. 98% words, 2% actual action is needed. Now, when we think about what it is that's happened even within the economy over the last, couple of years, but just think about what took place when the Federal Reserve attempted to lower rate, like they were going to lower rates into the future. People thought for sure that it was going to be a massive cut for emergency purposes. 50% basis point cut shocked the hell out of everybody. And that didn't lower interest rates in the broad economy, it actually elevated them. Now, thinking about what it is that the Federal Reserve does in order to create a financial system that is either tightening or loosening, using their words to create that environment. This is how the Federal Reserve is conducting monetary policy. Many people are going to focus in on the interest rate adjustment. In fact, pretty much everybody does. This is the reason why 98% of their talking works, is because they're talking about the interest rate adjustment. By talking about it, they can then get action out of the people, very much like them observing the fat briefcase. Now, when we think about this, we can go back and we can actually find where the Federal Reserve was actually communicating about this very thing. Right? And again, I like to go to Philip Jefferson for these speeches because he was ultimately the one who was talking most about it. Now, textual analysis, reading between the lines, textual analysis and central bank communications. Again, this is another Philip Jefferson speech dated February 21st, 2025. And the reason why I like these speeches so much is because they're recent. This isn't like old stuff. Some of the stuff that I do review is old. Like that, I mean, I'm bringing up documents from 25 years ago. This is within the last year. And this is exactly what he has to say. Using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, and high-frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. Now, that is by far the most amazing thing to really wrap your head around, considering where it is that the wealth is being transferred to asset holders. They can communicate in a way that then has how do they put specific sentences communicated by the central bank to be quickly incorporated into asset prices. So if they want to get some stimulus out of the economy, if they want to or if the economy is needing some stimulus, and where you think the stimulus goes to, right? They're trying to increase aggregate demand. Aggregate demand comes from consumption. Well, who is it that is doing the consumption? The top 20% of households. If they could use specific sentences that are quickly incorporated into asset prices that elevate those asset prices, where are they getting the stimulus from? From the top 20% of household incomes who have increased their wealth and are now using that to go out there and consume in the economy. Policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect, of course, the short-term interest rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. As many people look at the Federal Reserve and saying their interest rate adjustments are too tight or too loose or too accommodating or too restrictive, and they talk about that, what they are not necessarily considering is how it is that the policymakers, knowing their communications, are incorporated into those asset prices, and again, creating an environment that is either restrictive or tightening in the broader economy. See, this is how they do it. They do it with their communications. See, when we think about the interest rate adjustments, most people are thinking, okay, well, the Federal Reserve has no other choice. They have to cut interest rates. And if they cut interest rates, that's going to be a really stimulating effect to the economy. And I think to myself, well, yeah, maybe if they went below the neutral interest rate, then they might be able to stimulate the economy. But that's not really how they operate now, because the lowering of interest rates really doesn't create the inflationary expectations in which that a lot of people would have anticipated the Fed doing it. And the quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the zero interest rate policy for almost 10 years after the great financial crisis kind of proved that to be the case, that although people's expectations of elevated inflation are occurring because of the money printer, the reality of the situation was not occurring for the Federal Reserve. So here it is, 2018, and they're writing speeches and documents and talking about the problem them needing to solve was a risk of inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. And again, very odd for people to consider when you think about the Federal Reserve was operating at the lower bound of zero. They had zero interest rate policy for years, and it didn't create the inflation that they needed. That is something that really 98% of the people don't really communicate or talk about. Again, 98% talk, 2% action. When we think about how it is that the Federal Reserve is truly conducting their monetary policy now, it's really in relation to the neutral interest rate. And again, this is very deep for a lot of people to try and wrap their heads around, but the neutral interest rate is when they are neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's when they're neutral. And that neutral interest rate, it rises on inflation expectations. This part of the monetary policy, I don't know why it's not communicated out there, but it's really not communicated. I don't even know if the high-ranking CEOs and top economists or anybody else is giving this any kind of consideration. I know the only reason why I give it any kind of consideration is because it was communicated through the Federal Reserve's own words. Now, these speeches that they give, these documents, when I read through them and I think to myself, wow, this is some pretty good information, how come it doesn't seem to be talked about on the mainstream media? Like, I can go to the mainstream media and I can type in neutral interest rate and look for articles, and it's like crickets, all right? Hardly anybody talks about the neutral interest rate. And I'm thinking that is probably one of the most profound things that people need to understand in order to know whether or not the Federal Reserve is accommodating or restricting the economy. It's just not a matter of lowering interest rates. Lowering interest rates doesn't necessarily create an inflationary scenario, nor does it stimulate the economy. I mean, it does the expectations, that it does 100% of the time. It does elevate the expectations, which in turn can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy of elevated inflation. But when we look back through the Federal Reserve's own issues that they were facing through their own words, talking about how it is that quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the aftermath of that did not create the environment that they were needing in order to conduct monetary policy. Essentially, they were stuck at the lower bound. You know? Again, like when I think about this from a working class point of view, as an individual person on what it is that I need to do in order to, make my way through this world, I think to myself, man, there is really nothing that the Federal Reserve can do to create an environment that is going to benefit the working class again. There was a time it used to work, but after the great financial crisis essentially came to an end. See, there was a time when lowering interest rates would get corporations to go out there and start investing into their businesses. By investing into their businesses, they would hire people. That hiring people would get more people working, more people consuming. That more consumption, supply demand imbalances, and they would find the inflationary pressures that the Fed would be looking for. But it failed. It didn't work anymore. They lowered interest rates to the lower bound of zero. Unemployment fell to historically low levels, was running consistently at these historically low levels from the Obama administration all the way through the first Trump administration, and it didn't create the inflation that they were looking for. Quite opposite of every economics 101 book or economist belief out there. Everybody knew it. If you lower interest rates and you go into this massive money printing, you are going to find inflation. Guaranteed. Right? No doubt about it. Except it didn't happen. And nobody really communicates that. Right? They want to pretend like as if it didn't occur. Or, just turn a blind eye to it or something. Like they may even seen it and are like, yeah, anomaly, whatever. Money printer go burr, prices go up. And so when I think about that, I wonder why it is that people have received such an information overload that then takes it away, distracts from the reality of what it is that the Federal Reserve was facing, right? Because when people started believing the elevated inflation expectation, this started to benefit the Fed. Like it literally started to pull that neutral interest rate off the lower bound. With that neutral interest rate very close to zero, like they had no ammunition. This is something that Ben Bernanke was talking about 20 years ago. So with that neutral interest rate being close to the lower bound of zero, the only way to get that elevated neutral interest rate was from elevated inflation expectations. There was no other way to do it. Right? And so when you think about what happened here over the last few years, it has been nonstop broken supply chain and elevated inflation expectations. Nonstop, right? I mean, from COVID, war, tariffs, credible threat of more tariffs, right? Even if the Supreme Court calls them illegal, there's a Game 2 plan already established. So what is it that's going to come into the future other than elevated inflation expectations? Now, knowing if we go back and we look at monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, John Williams straight up says that the problem we needed to solve is a risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. So here it is. We have inflation that is persistently too high. This is where the Fed would rather be. Now, something I find interesting about it is that is inflation really that high? I mean, who came up with the 2% target anyway? New Zealand central banker just made it up one day and it stuck. And so it's not like some kind of, law or rule or anything else that we have to have a 2% inflation. It's something that they just made up one day and thought that sounded good and decided to go with it. Ultimately, most central banks are targeting 1 to 3% with a 2% average, which is very much in line with what it is that we have going on right now. I mean, sure, it's slightly above the 2% target, but then since 2012, when the Federal Reserve established a 2% target, they never once achieved it. Never once did they ever achieve a 2% target on inflation. They were either above it or below it, and most of the time they ran below it. How do you handle a situation where your inflation expectation runs too low to conduct monetary policy because you're operating at the lower bound of zero with a low neutral interest rate? There is no way of solving this problem outside of inflation. Massive inflation and inflation expectation. So as we see it take place and people think, oh man, the Fed screwed up, I'm thinking, no, they didn't. This is exactly what they wanted. And the perception, the communication, the expectations, and the belief of the people was the tool that they used to get it. Right? Very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, as they find it so counterintuitive to everything that they have ever learned about the Federal Reserve and monetary policy. Most mainstream media articles will believe. Yeah. All right. Are we back? All right. Lost a bunch of you guys. That's okay. The important ones stuck around so that we can get the information out there and we can understand it better for ourselves so that we can then look at this mainstream media for the reality of it, knowing that their real strategy behind, yep, we're back. The real strategy behind the Federal Reserve's actions is to literally change the perception of the people's expectations and the market's feeling about what the reality is as far as what has taken place out there. So when I think about some of the communication that is coming out right now about the Federal Reserves and their actions going into the future, you think about some of the times or how many times they've talked about the weakening labor market, or they talk about the labor market being the issue, but yet here it is, we're still fairly strong labor market, like the unemployment hasn't risen significantly. And I know a lot of times when I bring that up, people want to argue with that, saying, oh, dude, the reality is much worse than that. And I can agree. Yeah, that's probably true that the reality of the situation when it comes to the jobs market is probably a lot worse than what the official numbers are saying. But we're not necessarily thinking about what it is that the official numbers are as far as what the reality is. Like that part, we already know kind of to be fake. What we're looking at is the numbers that they are going to use to conduct their monetary policy, because that's what we have to look at. If we look at anything else, then we're just kind of assuming things or pretending like, we know better than they do, which we might. I mean, that very well could be true. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we know better than they do. They're the ones who are conducting policy. So we have to understand their strategy, understand what it is that they are doing and the tools that they use, right? So when we think, okay, if the Federal Reserve is really conducting a dual mandate where they have to keep low inflation with stable prices, I believe we're somewhat there, right? 2.7, 2.4, 1.8. What is what's inflation around 2%? I mean, between 1 and 3 seems reasonable to me to be around that 2% target, since there is no real rule to it, and it's a completely arbitrary number that was made up by a New Zealand banker a bunch of years ago. So really, when you think about low and stable prices, I believe that the Federal Reserve is somewhat achieving that level. And again, we can argue with it with all the different inflationary scenarios that you can find out there. Their official numbers are coming in somewhere in range, in my belief, right? In my opinion. And so if you have inflation down and you have unemployment running low, I'm sorry, what is it that the Federal Reserve is trying to do again? Be right here. This is it. Like, this is where they wanted to be, right? Slightly elevated inflation and inflation expectations, unemployment that's running low, consumer that seems to be resilient. Like, how is it that the Federal Reserve is not achieving their goals is beyond me. Like, people saying they're screwed up, they don't know what they're doing, they're frustrated, you can see the dissent within their ranks and all the other stuff that's going on. And I'm thinking, that's all part of this. Like, even the idea of the dissent is part of the plan. Going back to Jefferson's speeches, he said it in May 13th of 2024. He says the potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. How many times have they done that in the past? Very rarely. Very rarely did the Federal Reserve and the officials ever come out with the massive disagreeing with each other like they are right now. That rarely ever occurred. Like, if you had one dissenting vote in the past, it was like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? He's a rogue, right? And that's the way they would feel about a vote that was anything outside of the policymaker's view, like the collective view. So here it is in this speech, though, he's talking the potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. That never happened until now. Like, even at the time of this speech, it hadn't really happened. Like, a little bit, but now, after this speech was given, here it is, like 6 months, a year later or whatever, all of a sudden you see this, like, dissent starting to take place within the Federal Reserve. Like, don't think it wasn't a plan. It was part of the plan. I mean, here it is. Jefferson was literally talking about it before it occurred. knowing that they never really dissented before this. But he knew that the potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. This is the operations that we have going on right now. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends itself to stimulating debate. How many people are talking about it, right? Everybody, every news organization, everybody's talking about this dissent that's happening. As for stimulating debate, ultimately, better policy. You know why? Because they get to use their words. The closer they get to the actual meeting, the more that they can start deploying the fat or thin briefcase. Right? Much like we were talking about the briefcase earlier, in which the Federal Reserve never communicated. And so the only way the markets could get any kind of expectations of what was going to happen at the meeting was by Greenspan's either big old giant fat briefcase full of documents to convince the other policymakers to adjust rates, or it was really thin and not much convincing was needed and everything was going to be the same. Right? This is how the markets used to interpret the possibility of what was coming from a Federal Reserve meeting. Now they have all these people communicating about it and then disagreeing with each other. Right? Like that's something that never occurred before. So the closer they get to the actual meeting, the more that they can deploy information of either a fat briefcase or a thin briefcase. And if you understand that analogy, it makes a whole lot of sense. All right, let's read through some of these comments here. Thank you guys for coming back onto the live stream. We kind of lost touch there for a little bit. All right, I don't think recessions are possible because the Fed put a constant liquidity can be printed if issues arise. Don't worry, just be long. Well, I would have to think like recessions are generally going to come because of the loss of aggregate demand. Right? People lose their job, or they're getting very worried about losing their job, or the layoffs are rising, or something of that nature is starting to take place, and it's very concerning for them. And so what you find is that the aggregate demand starts to fall. That's what's causing the recession, right? Is a drop in aggregate demand so severe that it falls into recession and, all this other stuff. If people were spending like crazy, it wouldn't happen. Now, think about this. Back in the day, it used to be the working class who was the consumer. So if the aggregate demand was falling, it's because the consumer wasn't there. It's because the average person, the working class, wasn't working, or at least they were concerned. Now, whether they are working or concerned, it doesn't matter. They're not the consumer anymore. It's at the top 20%. So yeah, when you say that there's not going to be a recession, the working class people, will feel the impacts of it, but it will be a recessionless recession in the sense that you might have a job to go to, but it may not be a good job, right? But if you are working a job, flipping burgers, serving beers, doing, driving truck or doing something, but you were working some, $200,000 a year job at some zombie corporation that won belly up, even though it's a bad job, even though it is not a very good job, it's a job. And if it's a job, you're not unemployed. And that's the point about it, right? All the people who are working class now who used to participate in the economy in a very profound way, we were the consumer. When we increased our wages, we increased our hours, we increased our productivity, when we increased everything that was going on within the working class, that was a huge benefit, not only to us, the working class, but it was also to the economy, because then we would go out there and we would spend a bunch of money. By spending that money, the increase in consumption would start to take place, and then we would find the economy start to grow again. But that we're out of the game now. We're just not really even part of it. Even Jamie is like it's not just me who's saying that. I've been saying it for a long time because I recognize it from the Cantillon effect. That's why the reason why I share the Cantillon essay so much on here is because it's very telling of the situation we now face with the working class individual suffering the consequences of the manufacturer not being able to compete here in our nation, and foreign production coming in. Understanding that situation is giving me a much better reality to what it is that I need to do, because I understand that my working class job will never be enough. Like it might be enough to cover the bills. It might be enough to just barely scrape by and to eat. But it's not going to be enough to actually provide you with anything of abundance or significance. Right? That has to come from extra. And that's the hard part to understand, is because most people work so damn hard at their job that they don't necessarily want to put in any more extra, right? And that's really where the whole thing starts to fall apart for most people, is that they wish and hope and dream that there is a situation that can come that would then bring them the ability to say, hey man, my good job is providing me with enough. And don't give me, I wish it was there. I do. But knowing the case and understanding it for the reality of what it is, we could blame politicians all day long, right? Oh, it's their fault, it's them, they did it. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's cool. But yet, this has been going on through many administrations, many different types of politicians, many different, conservatives and liberals and everything else. And yet the separation still occurs. You're going to find more war, more debt, more separation between the rich and the poor. Very little doubt, right? So why that happens, instead of blaming politicians, but to recognize it as ever increasing amounts of new money that pours into the system that separates the rich from the poor, if you stop that flow of new money coming in, everybody falls into pain and misery. If you keep the flow going, the separation occurs even more. Well, doesn't look good either way, but I'm going to position myself to deal with either one of those scenarios. Most likely, it's going to be ever increasing amounts of war, debt, and separation. So, knowing that you have to be an asset holder. If you're not in assets, you're going to be left behind. In fact, I saw something on X earlier. Somebody had posted just that thing. They were talking about silver and how dramatically high it's moved, and how you need to be in like the silver commodity, or I guess like the people who are already in it or feeling lucky or something like that nature. But at the very end of this little blurb that he was talking about, it says, be in assets or be left behind. And I could not have agreed more. I mean, if you are not in assets, then you're depending on your day job in order to provide you with enough. And that is going to be very scary going into the future, because it's going to be like this deteriorating slope, as the good jobs now will not be good jobs going into the future. Like, it's just going to deteriorate worse and worse and worse. And because more people are getting into the assets, right? You have to think about it. It's like when I was a kid, it was very difficult for just an average everyday person to get into stocks and stuff like that. Not really hard. Like if you were just of mind to it, you could have done it. But for the most part, it wasn't easy. Now it's really easy. I mean, I got 3 apps on my phone in which that I could buy stocks from. So that's pretty cool in the sense that the availability to the average person, like to be able to take $5 and be able to play in the stock market, that's something that has never occurred in an economy before. Like the ability for just a small fraction of acquiring the asset, right? You don't have to buy the whole thing. You can just buy little pieces of it. That's something like is fairly like, well, it's definitely new, but how do I put it? It's like fairly um, leveling of the playing field in a lot of ways. So if you think about people who then use that ability to get into those assets from an early age, right? How many times have you just wasted $50 on something? If you were to be of mind to put that towards a position, even if it was like something really secure, like bonds, something silly like that. That's not silly. I mean, not aggressive in a way that, has like this major return to it. If you were to put it into something like that very regularly your entire life, by the time you get through your, screw ups and, getting things together and then finally making it as an adult, if you were to be very consistent in that, like even through the screw ups and all the other stuff, just kept deploying a little bit of money towards something that was having that return over time, it is amazing the amount of wealth that one can acquire just by simply being disciplined from a very young age. Now, knowing how easy it is today, how many people are actually going to do it? Some. Many, like there's more 19-year-olds who are setting up a retirement account now. Like I was reading that on a Robinhood CEO interview. right? Where there's more 19-year-olds who are now setting up retirement funds than at any time in history. And you think, man, yeah, they better, because if they don't, they're going to be left behind. There's like, they don't really have much other choice in the matter. Their working class job probably isn't going to be enough. They're going to have to do that, have that day job, and do a side hustle. Because with the side hustle, that's where they can get the extra to put towards those assets. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea that this is what people are going to have to do. I mean, this is something that my kids are going to have to do. I'm hoping that I can get them an early start enough so that when they are on their own doing this, that they will at least feel comfortable enough to know that if they are going to get, take a hit, lost jobs, whatever issues that they may face going into the future, that they will have something that is going to be there, that is going to be consistent, that is going to carry on throughout the rest of their lives, that they can then have. So if they do fail or fall, at least they don't have to start from scratch, because starting from scratch is probably going to be the most difficult thing in the entire world to do. Unless you come up with brilliant ideas, businesses, something else, going out there and starting from scratch at 40 years old from this point on is going to be very hard. Okay? It's already pretty difficult. It's not impossible. In fact, there's more opportunities now to make it than there ever has been. But it's very difficult for people who have not made it at this point to this. If you're 40 years old today, you're really stuck in your ways. And being stuck in your ways and the old mentality, this is going to be very devastating, because most of the time you're going to end up blaming. When we look at it in a different fashion and we say, okay, what is it that I can do here? Because I am useful. I do have skills. I can provide a service. There's something out there that I can do. When you start recognizing that and moving towards that, following that particular passion of something that you really feel like you are being useful and helpful with, this is generally the energy in which that you can then find the flow into abundance, right? And so it's being useful, being helpful, being productive, right? That's that's the energy in which that most people have a tendency to be worn out by. Like, they don't like the idea of it. It's almost as if it's giving something up. And ultimately, it's true. You have to give it up. You have to give up everything in which that you had believed to be the reason that things are, right? If you're 40 years old and you're screwing up, think, man, I didn't think about it right. I wasn't doing it right. And see, this is my problem that I was facing. See, I'm trying to relate to what it is that I was experiencing at 40 years old. Right? 40 years old, I was drunk. I had massive amounts of debt. In my opinion, it was a massive amount of debt. I mean, looking back, it wasn't that much, but when you have no ability to pay off $20,000 of credit card and medical and whatever, you just like, it's just a debt that's just going to be there forever, and it actually kind of grows over time because you haven't been paying it off, and the interest payments and all that other stuff starts to collect on it. That was where I was at. So I wasn't in a very good position. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't thinking right. And when I decided that, man, I can change this around, there's something that I can do here to actually come up with a good outcome, even at 40 years old. And I know the number one thing for me was I had to give up alcohol, right? Giving up drinking was probably the key moment that allowed for the shift to happen, right? And it was years afterwards before anything real started to take place. Like, I mean, I started saving a little bit of money, and with that savings, I was able to pay off debt. But it wasn't like I was paid off debt and it was just like, woohoo, right? I mean, I was taking like $20 down and putting it down on, a $10,000 credit card debt that I had. It was like, it almost seemed insignificant doing it. But something very interesting starts to take place when you're doing that and you put yourself in that mindset that I'm going to pay this thing off, even if it is $20 at a time, I don't care. Is that all of a sudden the energy within you, the subconscious behaviors, the belief system is shifts, right? And then what you start doing is you start looking for ways that you could actually save money so that you could pay that debt off earlier. You're not looking for the $20 that you could earn to pay it off. You're looking for $20 that you could save to pay it off, right? And then when you start moving into this mentality and you start seeing that debt moving down the line, it's getting less and less, that's the motivation within itself, right? And pretty soon you're like really looking for that money to get the paid off, whether you're putting in the extra hours or cutting back on even more expenses, doing whatever it is you can in order to get that thing paid off because you're actually seeing it fall, right? Being in that position, you have no idea how awesome that really is. When you're moving that debt down in a significant fashion and you can actually see it and you're working hard to do it and you're looking for it, you have trained yourself to be one of the greatest investors. Don't give it up, right? Don't let that go. Don't think that once you have that debt paid off, that it's just like finally the switch and I can go out there and start spending money again. No, man, you have already conditioned yourself, positioned yourself to be the greatest investor. Because as soon as that debt's paid off, you're an instantaneous flow. And now you can start moving that into the appropriate position to start getting a return off of it, start becoming the asset holder. Paying off debt is by far the greatest investment that you can do. And not only it will train you to be in that limited mindset as far as I don't want to spend this money, I want to save this money, put it towards the debt. Being in that sort of energy and belief system, once you have paid that debt off, it's like instantaneous, man. Boom. All of a sudden you have the portfolios building, the bills are paid, all the things are happening, and a change that starts to happen within your life starts to really occur. And that is, you're not stressed, right? You feel better about things. You don't feel like the world is coming down on you, like there's chaos about ready to come and just, wreak havoc on the entire world. You actually feel somewhat good about the situation that you are in. You're looking out there at opportunities and possibilities. The whole mind shift starts to change. Right? See, before you were worried and anxious and just, had no belief that it would work. And then after you switch it, now you all of a sudden look out there and you're not thinking about the problems that you see. And if you do see the problems, you look for the results or the ways that you can resolve that. These are the ways that you end up looking at the world, and it changes everything about your outcome. But it really comes down to understanding that you have to be useful, right? You're not going to change the outcome by complaining. It's painful, it hurts, we don't make enough, they have too much money, whatever. That complaining doesn't produce any kind of outcomes. You might get some, like, what is it? The oil gets the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and so you might get some results complaining, but you certainly won't find abundance. They will just give you just enough to shut you up. All right, and that's generally what ends up happening. Is most of the time, the government or whatever is going to do just enough to shut the people up. All right, $5 super chat. Let's go check it out. All right, the wealth building journey, $5. What kind of currency alternatives can prevent the U.S. from having to deal with Triffin's dilemma, the Cantillon effect, or Gresham's law? You can't. Those are laws that are going to be present no matter what. There's really no currency or system that is going to avoid the natural consequences that come from these economic forces. It's like, you know, it's like saying, hey, what kind of plane can we design that will never, ever, ever come down or crash, right? And it was like, well, you might be able to design something that can fit that criteria for a while, but I assure you, it's a piece of mechanics. It will crash, right? It will come down at some point. Whether it's now or later, something is going to fail. Put enough of them out there, something's going to fail, right? So it's better to understand why it's happening than to think that you can control it or stop it. All right. And I mean, that's my opinion, because I don't know what it is that you think you can do to stop it. Like, I mean, there's ideas like, you can always have government regulations and rules and intervention of some sort that tries to, like, manipulate the situation, but the underlying economic force is still playing out. And that's really where I think, like, a lot of times it's misguided belief that, things like tariffs can bring manufacturing back. Like, no, it can't. That's like almost impossible. The investment the production, the profit from it, it's just not there. It's like that's for foreigners to do because they do it at a much cheaper rate. And so I know that's very disheartening for a lot of people to hear. And then they think, well, no, if we put these tariffs on it, then it'll be a cost, right? Input. Therefore, we can match that and then we can be competitive. Well, think about it. The idea of the tariff itself is because the underlying economic force is saying that you are not profitable. If you start putting tariffs on it, you're going to have to put ever increasing amounts of tariffs on it because you're going to be ever increasingly less profitable. And that's a very unfortunate thing because the moment that government gets out of the way, there goes your job. Right? And this is, I mean, I know like for a lot of people, they would like for there to be like a special thing or a special system or a special moment or something like that in which that we can solve all the world's problems. And I'm just thinking that's not like, I don't know if that's really up to us to do, right? Like it's not up to me to think of a way or a system or a currency or anything else that can be like awesome for everybody. Like I can't I that's not my job. That's not even in the realms of possibility of a human to do. What I'm supposed to do is recognize what it is that's happening out there and then deal with that appropriately. That's what I'm supposed to do. Like we can give our opinions, we can mouth off about it. We can even try and become like really good at politics and getting up into office and trying to fundamentally change the way that things are being done out there. And for a lot of people out there, I can see where that would be like a very driving passion for them. And hey, man, if that's what it is that you got going on in your life, go for it, man. I mean, go and change the world and make it a better place. Let's see it happen. I would love for that to take place. Most politicians who have never been in the political arena have this really good belief within them that they want to be there to help. But then once they're in office, all they really want to do is just be there, stay there, keep their money. And so they just kind of do things that make sure that they can secure their vote back in again. And that isn't necessarily the move that is the best for the people themselves. That's a move that's best for them to continue on with their business as far as being in politics, which essentially means that they have to get the vote. So I don't know. Like, I mean, do you really want to sit around and think about ways that you can change the system? Or do you want to think about ways that you can deal with the system so that you can get the best outcome from it? You know, that's what I want to do. I mean, but no, there's no changing. You can't deny those laws and you can't avoid them. You know, there's no way. You can make them like appear that they have disappeared, you know, like they don't exist, but they do. They're under there and they're causing havoc just like everything else, you know, like it would ever, if there was no rules, it would be, you know, it's still wreaking havoc down in the economy. So like here, let me give you an example of it. All right. Here you're going to find at some point in the future, you're going to find the people who had participated in buying into those assets early. They're going to actually have a name that's going to, and I don't know what that name is going to be, but they're actually going to have a name for those people who did that, right? Because there's going to be a whole group of people out there who didn't know that they were supposed to do that. And then they didn't do it, thinking that they were going to go and try and get a job or a good career or something like that, believing that was the road that they should take in order to acquire the abundance in their life. And although I'm not, don't get me wrong, that's a good way to get abundance in your life. But the problem with it is that the belief system that that would be enough is a faulty one. It doesn't work like that anymore. I mean, it's going to be good, don't get me wrong, and you'll be doing better than, say, somebody who's flipping burgers, but getting a degree is not a guarantee that you're going to have a decent way of life going into the future. In fact, it'll probably just mean you're going to be living paycheck to paycheck just like everybody else anyway. Now, starting from an early age, regardless if you're the person who's going to go and get the degree or if you're the person who's going to go to work at some restaurant doing whatever, it if you are disciplined and put money towards those assets early, right? Now, granted, if you get the degree, it's probably going to be difficult to get started in assets early. But if you go to work right away, it'll be a little easier, but you won't be able to get as much because you're working paycheck to paycheck and you have to just scrounge this little bit out of it. Regardless, the people who get into assets, if the degree doesn't do it, right? And the person at the restaurant who goes and, serving beers or whatever does, those people are going to excel higher because the working job isn't going to be enough to cut it. Now, if this person also gets in assets, obviously they're going to go much higher after they get their degrees paid off and all that other stuff. But the people who didn't do it at all, they're going to be down so far, like you're going to have such a good paying job in order just to be able to just make ends meet that it's going to be very difficult to, acquire anything beyond that. The people at the very end of it, they're going to suffer the most. In fact, they're probably most likely going to have to be getting UBI or some sort just in order to, you know, just to keep from quitting their job and rioting, basically provide them with the food. All right. We are in the top 5%. We spend $600 a year on Christmas. We skip Black Friday and Cyber Monday. There's no chance a house will go that cheap unless we're talking about fundamental, very different world. I mean, even now, it's like it's getting to the point now that new houses are cheaper than existing homes, right? Because a lot of these home builders are trying to unload these houses, this inventory that they have, coming up with any kind of sales tactic that they can figure out, whether it's buying down interest rates or, lowering the price on it in general. But the idea that new constructed homes are selling for less than existing homes, that does not bode well for the new construction market looking to ramp up inventory. Now, that is going to be a major problem going into the future, not only from like you think about it, if you have a lack of production, then you have to fill in that gap, that lack, before you can start moving into production, right? So like, if you were building a 50 units a day or something like that, and you cut back to 25 units a day for a couple of weeks, well, then you have to make up for that cutback, right? So now you have to ramp up and do, 75 units a day for a couple of weeks to make up for the fact that you had, cut back on production. So thinking about that sort of thing happening within the housing industry, this is going to be really difficult the longer this goes on, because the more you cut back on new starts and completions, then that's the gap in inventory production. That gap will not be easy to fill the longer it goes on, because the people who would fill the gap are leaving the job. All right, they're starting other businesses, moving on to other industries, leaving the country one way or the other. So that's not going to leave a whole lot of room to ramp up production again when the time comes, or if the time even comes for that. Thinking about that in general, even though houses are selling, or new constructed houses are selling less than an existing home, that trend will change, right? Because the moment that the buy comes on, you're going to find that the difficulties in order to get a new house constructed are going to be much more in the future than they are today. Not only with inventory, or I'm sorry, the building material being depleted, but then also the workers themselves are also going to be depleted. So that right there in itself is going to force the cost of a new constructed home, beyond that of what we're already experiencing. Right? That's going to be a hard one to fill. And like I'm getting to the point thinking that, man, I don't even know if like private residential homes is even going to be a very hot market going into the future. Like it is at times, and I can still imagine people are going to want single residential homes. But I can only assume that because the working class individual is no longer going to be able to be a consumer who is going to participate in the American dream like that, they're going to have to rent apartments, and there's really nothing else that can be done for them, except for build apartments. I get another one here? We did. Infamous NYC. Why is debt tightening if the Fed wants inflation? They don't want inflation. They want inflation moderately above 2%, which is what they got. Mortgage rates rising, layoffs, and AI seem all counter to the Fed interest. Why is the Fed tightening if it wants inflation? I don't think they are tightening. I think that they're loosening, right? In the sense that they're lowering interest rates, right? So lowering interest rates is a loosening of monetary policy, even though it's not loosening, it's just less restrictive. And the balance sheet, within itself being, ending that runoff, and it, again, is kind of like the idea that they are not necessarily going into quantitative easing, but that they are no longer withdrawing the liquidity, which is the tightening position, right? So both of those things have essentially come to an end, right? The belief within the people for the longest time is that they've been lowering interest rates and, going to zero and all that other stuff, which in turn should have lowered rates in the broader economy, which it did prior to the actual Fed adjustment. Because the moment that the Fed adjusted, they delivered it with a message that shocked everybody and made everybody go like, oh crap, things are bad. And they saw the interest rates start to rise on that because of risk, right? People don't want to be putting their money out there if they think that we're going to have issues going in the future. They're going to demand a higher return for it. And we saw that happening within mortgages and many other interest rates that were out there. So it's not just the Federal Reserve's actions, right? It's the words that they use. Again, 98% talk, 2% action. The interest rate adjustment itself has become such an insignificant thing when I think about it. Not that it's insignificant, but that the communication had way more impact than the interest rate adjustment did. I mean, it's 6 months to a year down the road before that interest rate adjustment really affects the economy. And when you think about it, a quarter interest rate point, 6 months to a year from now. How many people actually consider that when it's the Fed's policy? Nobody. But that's what it is, right? I mean, if you want to look at the interest rate adjustment, it's a quarter point or whatever it is, 6 months, even if it was a half, 6 months to a year. That's when it starts to impact the economy. By that time, people have already forgotten about the interest rate cut, and they don't even think about what's taken place in the economy being something that was adjusted a year ago. But the belief about what it is that's happening are instantaneous when the message is delivered. That's why it's 98% talk, 2% action. There is no real adjustment happening within the Federal Reserve when it comes to their monetary adjustment of interest rates for at least 6 months to a year. There is nothing that's really happening. However, the communication about it, that has all kinds of power and impact. That's why I just don't even really look at the interest rate adjustment as much as I think about the communication about it. That's far more impactful. And it's not me. It's not even really, it's not even me who says it. It's the Fed, right? It's the Fed who says that. Ben Bernanke saying that, monetary policy is 98% talk and 2% action. He said that 10 years ago, right? And now here it is. Since then, they have developed all kinds of tools and abilities to deliver the message to you. There was a time that to hear anybody from the FOMC voice anything out there to the public was non-existent prior to 2012 when they changed and shifted the way that they were going to conduct monetary policy. They realized after the great financial crisis, things were just too screwed up for them to be able to use their traditional methods. Okay? That traditional method being the interest rate adjustment. Once they saw it, they were like, guys, we had interest rates at the lower bound of zero, and we expanded the balance sheet by 400% or something. I mean, they took it from 850 billion to over $4.5 trillion. And so all this effort didn't create the inflation through the jobs market that they were expecting or like they had always achieved in the past. See, that's what I think is really funny is like this is the way that they had always conducted it. That's why everybody looks at it that way. And then when they're didn't have it occur, they started writing these speeches saying, what we really need is opportunistic reflation. Like, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody talk about that? About how, who was it? Was it Loretta? Who is it who said that? It was, oops. Uh, I can't even remember who said it. Let's see if I can find it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just kind of stumbling through this here, trying to figure out where that thing went. Liz Waller. I don't remember who. Waller Bernanke. Oh well, that sucks because that was actually a pretty good little blurb out of that. I wish I could find it. See, this is me when it comes to trying to figure out where it is that I saw some things. Like I should really have a better way of like, organizing this so that it's like it comes out a lot easier. Anyway, opportunistic reflation. We talked about it the other day inside of a speech that was given back in 2018. Um, and again, I can't remember who it was that said it, but that's what they were looking for, opportunistic reflation in order to get that neutral interest rate up off the lower bound and get some of their ammunition back. They got it. They totally got it. Okay, when this happens, they all become trillionaires. Did the banks not buy treasuries with that money from quantitative easing one, two, and three, so it never made it into the economy? Well, essentially, they swelled up the big banks. See, here's the thing. Um, the way that the Federal Reserve would typically have operated interest rate adjustments was through the overnight lending rate between the big banks. And so they worked in what they refer to as a limited reserve system. And so these reserves on the big banks, right? So at the end of the day, there was a reserve requirement. They had to have so much on their books. Some of them had excess reserves, some of them were in need of reserves. The ones who had excess reserves would lend them to the ones who were in need of reserves. This overnight lending rate was the effective fund rate. And this is how the Federal Reserve would conduct monetary policy is by buying and selling treasuries or moving the reserve requirements around on these big banks in order to adjust the level so that that overnight lending rate would land within the target rate of the Fed funds rate, right? So that overnight lending rate between the big banks was the effective fund rate. However, during the quantitative easings and they lowered the interest rates to zero, they removed the reserve requirement and then filled up the balance sheets of these big banks with this an explosion of reserves, right? And this is really where ultimately the Federal Reserve was able to buy the treasuries from the big banks because the big banks are the ones who go to like the JP Morgans, Goldman Sachs. These are the guys, these are the primary dealers who go to the treasury and buy the treasuries. The Federal Reserve has to buy them from the secondary market, which means that they go to these big banks and then they buy those treasuries and put them on their balance sheet. Now, in order for this whole operation to work, essentially quantitative easing, where you have this massive swelling of all this balance sheets, the big banks ended up with reserves on their balance sheet that were completely swelled. But unless those things were lent into the system, they just sat there and didn't do anything. Okay? So it's just like you can print up all the money in the world, but if it just sits in the bank and doesn't go anywhere, then it doesn't create inflation, right? And that's essentially what ended up happening with that is that the majority of it just sat there not doing anything. The people who borrowed the money, right, borrowed it and bought cash flowing assets, well, then you saw the assets start to move up, right? But the people, the average everyday person, they weren't necessarily borrowing that money in the way that would then drive the consumer and the consumer goods up, like, would typically have happened in the past. Not because the consumer was borrowing the money to consume, that was happening, that was part of it, but it was the lowering of interest rate got the corporations to hire the people who then increased their wages and their income, and they went out and started to consume. But that part of the system broke down after the great financial crisis, when they were scratching their heads going, we got low interest rates, low unemployment, and low inflation. Why? Right? The workers should be creating this inflationary scenario, but the problem is that they're not the ones who are the consumer anymore. Right? That consumerism has moved up the line, up into the upper, household incomes, and the average everyday person isn't there anymore. This is the reason why they're not causing the recessions anymore either, right? Even if they lose their job, they're not really slowing down their consumption, or they're not slowing the general consumption down in the economy, because they're not doing enough of it to actually slow down, right? I mean, how is it that they can be so confident that we're not going into recessions? Because they're looking at the consumer. They're looking at the elevated asset price, and they're thinking, man, the consumer is the top 20% of households. All the working class people, they could lose their job completely and it wouldn't slow the consuming down. Right? I mean, that's not necessarily true, but you guys got to get what I'm saying. It's just like before, like 20 years ago, the working class was the consumer. But that's not the case anymore. Right? They still consume, just not enough. All right, they have all the females working and maybe more money. All right. Then they use the money they gain to buy more of the gold at the bottom. They do it again, same with stocks. Simon's image gets left, right, mirror inverted YouTube, so it looks like he's on the wrong side. Yeah, YouTube doesn't, like on these live streams, for whatever reason, when you're looking at the back facing camera, it flips it. So if I flip it around the other way, then it would be normal, right? But then I couldn't see the comments and I couldn't see the screen. Maybe they are confident they can BS us. No, they're definitely confident they can do that. And it's working. Just think about it. Nobody knows about the credible threat theory. The handful of people that follow this channel regularly, I mean, I have been grinding this credible threat theory so much on this channel that a lot of people have literally just left the channel. And hey, whatever. If they want to leave, that's up to them. But what we are discussing here on this channel is literally a view that is directed from the Federal Reserve itself, through their own words. Like, I am not making this stuff up. I am not taking it from somebody else's point of view. I'm not taking some ancient old, esoteric belief of how it is that central bankings are operated because of the last 100 years. I am not doing that either. What I have done is I have literally taken the words of the policymakers themselves and I am using it against them. And I think I am the only one. Everybody else in the discussion that I hear literally lends power to the Fed. Not saying that they're wrong, but the subconscious belief that the Federal Reserve doesn't want inflation and that everything that they're doing is causing inflation is exactly what they want you to believe. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but that's exactly what they would want from you. Now, I look at it and think, okay, why would they want that from me? And I think, well, they want that neutral interest rate to rise. Right? And again, I don't know who else is discussing this, but I know this to be the case because I'm reading it in their own words. I mean, Powell was just talking about it the other day in his speech, saying that we're 100 basis points closer now than we were a year ago. Even Waller, I think, was saying like something in that speech, get on with it. Let me see if I can find that one. Or the time has come. Which one was it? Maybe it was the time has come. Anyway, the oh, here we go. Determining the appropriate pace at which to reduce policy restrictiveness will be challenging. Choosing a slower pace of rate cut gives time to gradually assess whether the neutral rate has in fact risen, but at the risk of moving too slowly and putting the labor market at risk. Is the labor market really at risk? I mean, I mean, I guess a lot of people think that. This speech was given quite a while ago. When was this? This was September, so I guess it wasn't that long ago, right? And putting the labor market at risk. Cutting the policy rate at a faster pace means a greater likelihood of achieving a soft landing, but at the risk of overshooting on the rate cuts if the neutral rate has in fact risen above its pre-pandemic level. This would cause an undesired loosening of monetary policy. How many people discuss that? How many people are thinking about that as the neutral interest rate is rising on a credible threat of tariffs? How many people are taking into consideration that this is an FOMC member? This is one of the Federal Open Market Committee voting members of policy. This is a guy, one of the 12 people who votes on policy, saying that yes, we are in a restrictive level, but it's getting ever closer to that neutral rate. And in fact, we could find that the neutral interest rate has in fact risen. This would cause an undesired loosening of monetary policy. How many people think that it's even close to being loose? Nobody. Nobody thinks it's close to being loose. Everybody thinks that the Federal Reserve is trying to combat inflation, and yet here it is that they're talking about this position that they may be in, where it could find out that they're not being restrictive at all. How many, and then here it is, everybody saying, well, they're trying to bring inflation down. And I'm thinking, I don't know if everybody's got the right idea of what it is that the Fed's doing. The Fed is wanting to be at neutral. Whether neutral rises or they're able to lower to neutral, one way or the other, that's where they want to be. And it seems to me, from everything that I have gathered from the mainstream media narrative about tariffs, it's elevated the inflation expectation. I don't know, right? But I'm pretty sure that's the case from the stuff that I have read. If it is true, then I'm sure that neutral interest rate is rising. Much to the contrary of what Myron is saying. Myron, who is also on the FOMC, is saying quite the opposite. This is part of the dissent that is happening within the Fed. This is part of their communication style in order to achieve what it is that they are looking for. And again, when I think about it, when I look back and I look at it, it doesn't seem that confusing to me. It really doesn't. It doesn't, like, I am like all these other people are like, man, the Fed has no idea what to do about this. They are stuck between the labor market and inflation and they don't know what they're doing and la 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 la. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not true at all. I mean, maybe in their mind it is, and maybe in the position that they put themselves in because of that, maybe that's the way they feel about it. But the truth is that the Federal Reserve sees it in one direction, right? Just one. It's not this, oh man, we got to bow down to Trump, or we don't know it's raising that neutral interest rate or bringing the Fed funds rate to neutral. That right there is by far the most important thing that the Federal Reserve is thinking about when it comes to their monetary policy, because it's been communicated so many times and yet whispered out there in the mainstream media. They have never, not once have I ever seen them deliver anything as far as information about them trying to understand the neutral interest rate is rising on an inflation expectation because of the credible threat of tariffs, right? They talk about the neutral interest rate rising. They talk about the threat of tariffs and inflation rising. They talk about the Fed funds rate coming neutral, but very rarely do they combine all this together to say this was part of the monetary policy and how it is being conducted in order to achieve what it is that they are looking for, which is to increase aggregate demand and keep the consumer going, because that's the American economy, the consumer, which isn't the working class anymore. And they're trying to keep that hidden for as long as they can. Could the gap between people with good credit and those that don't need it is closing? No, unless you're using that credit to acquire cash flowing assets, I'm not sure what the difference would be for you. Just having credit isn't going to make any difference to you. You have to be in a cash flowing asset with it. And then having credit is going to be awesome for you, but you don't need it. And even the regular guy working can be in a cash flowing asset too without having to acquire credit. It's just credit's a hell of a lot easier and faster. And it's also more risk. All right. After Turkey Feast at the Wassabish Manor in Greenwich, Connecticut, the farm tripped a bath salts and saw the ghost of Oliver Cromwell and the King Charles. Tensions were high than the Petit Philip of the World Trade Center. Huh. Wow. Well, that was a bunch of babble. Okay. Sorry, man. I don't mean to give you a hard time, but I didn't understand any of that. All right. Professional money stealers, the grabbers. I got Larry Bird up in the house. Seeking Alpha is reporting that the Trump has picked the next Fed chair and odds on choosing its director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure how is that going to change anything about their 5-year long strategy that they've already announced, a couple of months ago. I mean, the consensus statement. That doesn't change, does it? I mean, well, it will in 5 years, but right now, that consensus statement is going to stay the same. And whoever it is that gets on the FOMC or whatever position it is that they are holding in accordance to the monetary policy will have their strategies linked to the idea of the consensus statement because that's their job, right? Is to not make up whatever they want. It's to fall in line with whatever it is that the consensus statement is stating. Their belief on what it is that they need to do to achieve that consensus statement may be different amongst them, but they're all on the same page as the consensus statement. That's what their job is. We can say, oh no, he's going to get somebody else in there, it's going to be different, but that's completely hypothetical, and I've never seen anything like that ever from anything within the Federal Reserve. All right, I'm being political in that fashion. All kinds of people talk about it. Donald Trump loves to say it. Everybody loves to ramble on about how political they really are, and yet I cannot find a single statement from any of the FOMC talking politically. I can't. I mean, I read hundreds of these speeches, and if I found even one sentence, I would deliver it to you. I cannot find it. I have yet to find it. Maybe there will be a day that it shows up, and when it does, I will be super excited to say, finally, I got it for you guys. I got the statement that says that they are acting politically, towards one political administration or another. Can't find it. Cannot find it. Now, you might say, well, just look at their actions. And I do look at their actions, and I look at it in accordance to what it is that they were talking about years before any of these presidents were president. And that action that they are taking is very much in line with the belief that I have taken on about them now suffering the consequences of having a federal funds rate at the lower bound of zero with a low neutral interest rate. The last 5 years has been a major attempt to try and solve that problem, and it's working. The neutral interest rate is rising. It's getting ever closer to the Fed funds rate. The economy is far less restricted than anybody had ever given it consideration for. The unemployment is still historically low. The consumer seems to be resilient. Asset holders are singing happy days. Right? How is it that they're being political? I don't get it. If anything, this is the best political environment that they could possibly have put Donald Trump in. He's the one who's screwing it up for himself. Yeah. He's the one who has such a bad rap. Ultimately, everybody should be just absolutely ecstatic with the fact that the stock market is up and the consumer is resilient and unemployment is still low. But now we gotta be pissed off and very angered about things and accusatory and all the other stuff. I love it. Calling people chief ripper offerers, which I've been studying economics for a long time. I still have yet to figure out the definition of a cheap ripper offerer is, but that was straight from Donald Trump, calling China out for stealing all our money, all our printed up money. All right. Brody says, "The biz, please don't post in all caps. I'm allergic." They are using the crypto they created for this purpose. Everyone's investing. They got the world investing. You think you are so... Oh, I love these. These are my favorite. Okay. You think you are so smart that another level of fluff, this intergalactic particles are falling as we speak. You're no further here nor there than a fly on rice. Huh, it's an interesting perspective. I mean, I love, yeah, don't don't watch. That's where they're getting. Okay, hold on. Let's cruise down here a little bit. Scott, at 20K, gold makes 20% of debt. All right. What crypto did the Fed and governor make? They didn't make any. No, they haven't made any crypto. The Federal Reserve didn't even really do it in the idea of regulating stable coins. Like they would be very happy for the government to regulate stable coins and they can conduct their monetary policy the way they always have. And whatever currency is being backed by the dollar, if it's 1 to 1, any kind of monetary policy will transfer right through the dollar into that other currency. So they don't really have to do anything about creating one. They just let the market create it and let the government regulate it. And they just go about their way. They just go about doing business like they normally do. Right. I mean, that works out perfect for them because they don't have to change anything about the way they're doing anything. Yeah. Let the government handle it and let the free market come up with the idea. All right. Chairman Powell was talking about something with global warming. Yeah, there was part of their policy was to consider climate as part of their issues, like in their mandate. But I think that's coming to an end. Like, I don't think they were going to be able to use it as a credible threat efficiently enough. So they just abandoned the idea. Like I can't find that in here. I'm just assuming that, but that's my personal assumption on it. Just because like everything that I found with communication about monetary policy and everything else never includes the climate thing. There was a time that it did. Like 10 years ago, they were talking about climate and being an issue with monetary policy, but I don't see that communicated anymore. Now, maybe it'll come up in the future and they will consider it again, but at this point I think that they're basically abandoning the idea of using climate for a monetary policy strategy. What's shocking is where silver is. 56.39 an ounce. Is it really though? Is it really that shocking? I mean, it's cool to see it there, but is it? I mean, you shouldn't really be shocked by that. That's like barely above its all-time highs that was set back in the early 80s. So, $56 an ounce. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like it. I mean, hell, I got the silver necklace on it. No way. I bought it for, how much did I pay for this? Like $30 I paid for this necklace. It has like 2 ounces of silver in it. That's pretty cool, right? I'm pretty excited about it. Got the silver ring, watching it go up. I have a bunch of silver that I like to, hold on to as far as emergency purposes, insurance policy. But when I think about where silver should be, like $56 an ounce isn't really that's still pretty low, right? I mean, $156 an ounce, now we're talking, that should be a little closer to where like the reality of it comparatively to gold. I mean, you think about it, it comes out of the ground at a 10 to 1 ratio to gold, and gold is at over $4,000. That should put silver at least $400. But, around $50, that seems incredibly cheap, right? That seems very, very cheap comparatively. So in my opinion, like even at 56, although it's exciting to see it there in that sense that, cool, right? But it really like that's still pretty low. I mean, it should be up over 150 at least, in my opinion, 250 really. 400 if you go back to the historic average of pulling it out of the ground. Then if you really want to get excited, I mean, 50% of it goes to industrious use. So there's really only like 1 to 5 ratio when it comes to investment purposes. It makes it even more valuable. Okay. Pure manipulation. Actually, I think it's the lack of manipulation that is causing silver price to go up, right? Because really, the manipulation is to keep the price suppressed. It's when they can't suppress it anymore. It's the lack of manipulation that is causing the price to go up. All right, it's not manipulated. It's manipulated. It's been manipulated. It's hard to keep it manipulated now. Money changers and the dealers control this. Good luck. All right, they kept silver from hitting $60 when they shut down the COMEX in the middle of the night. It's greed that's causing to go up. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Is it greed? I mean, I guess it could be greed if you want to give it that meaning, but to me, then in that sense, then I'm kind of in the boat with it, right? Because I have the silver because I'm hoping that it goes up, and I'm greedy in that sense. So it's just like, is it really greed? I get paid $1,800 every 3 months. Jeez. Should I borrow 7K against my stack of guarantee silver for a year of current price? What will you do? So guarantee silver, current price. What would you do? Well, unless you're doing something with it, you're gonna have to pay interest on it. So you're gonna end up losing money by doing that. And then what is it that you're planning on doing with the money? Like if you're gonna go and put that towards another investment, I would say go for it. But if you're not planning on doing anything with it, just hold the cash. I don't know. I mean, might as well hold the silver and keep the insurance policy. To be outside of the third party claim. Once you get into cash, now you're part of the third party claim again, third party risk. So, I mean, if you're asking me personally, if I was to be in that position, then unless I had a place that I was going with it, then I would not cash out my silver. Right? Like, but if I saw like, ooh, I want to get into that, and that was the only thing I had, then definitely, then I would, yeah, load it and get into the other item or whatever, the other investment. I'm not married to silver, right? I like silver, but I ain't married to it. Uh, just like the penny. Yeah, penny's gone. In fact, that's something. One of the guys at work sent me a picture. They just got the price list in, so we get, a lot of you know I work at a hardware store. We do retail sales for a living. And so we have like all these little stickers with the prices on it, and they come on these big sheets, So when the prices get updated, and a lot of it is corporately done, so where the new items come in from different costs or whatever, you go around and you adjust some of these prices. Most of them go up, some of them they do go down, some of them just stay the same. But all of them now are coming in at 5 cents. There's no more like 99 cents or 49 cents or '09 cents. It's all 45 or 95 or '05. There's no 99. There's no more pennies, no more cents at the end. It goes right to the nickel. And pretty soon we won't be taking pennies anymore. And I've been hoarding up on pennies. Like you guys saw it before, right? Like this is full of copper. Like, I don't know, you guys can see it. Can you guys see that? All copper pennies. All copper in there. Actually, there's a zinc one there, but most of them are most of them are copper. That's a zinc one, but most of them are copper in there, and I am going to continue to pull out all the copper pennies until they are finally out of the till, and I'm going to keep them forever because someday pennies will be dimes. All right, especially those copper ones. I mean, they're already 3 cents, so it wouldn't take what, but you know, too much of an increase. I mean, it would be quite a bit, but anyway, sell that copper and get some dollars to hold on to. No way. What do you mean? I got dollars right here. This is real money. Right? Copper. All copper pennies. All 81 and earlier. That's a pile. Yeah, and that's just not even close to what I got. I mean, illegal to melt pennies. Is it after this though? Once the penny has been disbanded and no longer accepted at the banks, will it still be like you can melt silver coins down now, junk silver? All right. All right. I went to Walmart for the first time in many years. Pharmacy. There was an entire aisle of eye drops. Kind of blew my mind. Walmart rounds up. How would they know? Oh, if you melted them down, yeah. A lot of things are illegal. The government won't let it fail is called compliance bubble. The government cannot afford to. Can't afford to what? Make pennies anymore? Grok said I need 1,150 caliber ammo cans full of 90% copper pennies for 100K. Are they 90%? I thought they were 95. I think they're 95% copper, aren't they? What's interesting is how much of an alloy there is in penny, not pure copper. That's like the zinc, like they're not pure, you're right. Like these are 95% copper. Isn't it 95? Pretty sure that's what it is. There's a great website to go to. It's called Coinflation. If you ever want to see the value of any of the melt value of any of your coins, including the silver ones, go to it's like co-inflation, Coinflation. It's a great site. Awesome. Let me go there real quick. Boom. Coinflation. All right. 95% copper from 1909 to 1982. And it's only like some of the 82s were zinc. And there's point 0.3, or I'm sorry, 3.2 cents in each one. So it's 327% of the face value a copper penny is. A zinc penny is 84% of face value. So it's almost 1 penny in zinc, right? And it's 97.5% zinc. So even those old pennies are pretty close to being worth their face value, being worth, 1 cent in metal. A regular dime, like just your regular dime in circulation right now, has 2.5 cents worth of metal in it. So it's only worth 25% of face value. Those dollar coins, they only got eight cents worth of metal in it. So all those big $1 presidential coins, those Sacagawea coins, they only have 8 cents worth of metal in it. I mean, hell, 2 copper pennies almost have more metal value than a presidential dollar does. Yeah. You scroll down a little bit further down in there and you get into the silver, and that's where it gets really fun to look at because the silver quarter right now has $10.20 worth of metal in it. That's incredible to think. Like, when all those times you ever heard about people saying, it's just like, oh, back in my day, you used to get a gallon of gas for a quarter. Well, hell, now you can get almost 2 gallons of gas if you have the right quarter, right? You just have to have that right quarter. $10 for a silver quarter. That's incredible. A silver dime is $4.08. All right. It's called Being Late, Scott. I do agree with what you think. The penny being gone is like the 80% no longer mattering. They both the same symptom, bottom and falling down. All right. The DOGE alone has placed the U.S. at a head start. Google are manufacturing their own AI chips. They don't want to depend on NVIDIA. Those tech companies have cash piles to do these things. Yeah, they might have it. They may not want to depend on it, but if they can't do it and be profitable, I guarantee you they will shut down operations. So if it's profitable to them, then they'll do it. But if it's not, then they won't. They can try, but it'll shut down after a while, right? I love counting junk silver. It takes all day and I feel rich. See, other countries still have government full of reckless spending. If you're not profitable, you don't matter in the system. Yeah, that's pretty true. Uh, Back to the clipping quarters. That's funny. No, I mean, I would imagine that it won't be too much longer, and that the idea of even using coins at all will be like pretty much out the window, man. Like people just won't even be able to use them. God, I'm mumbling here. Um, and already, like I experienced that, in that very, very, very rarely does anybody ever give me coins when I'm working. Like occasionally somebody will pull out their change and they'll hand me over the appropriate coins, but almost always coins are used to give back change when somebody is doing a cash purchase. It's very rarely do I accept coins. I mean, I will accept them if people give them to me, but very rarely does it happen. Like, I don't know, 1 out of 100 cash transactions, they will actually hand me hand me coins. Otherwise, I'm gonna hand it back. I mean, I'm gonna hand the coins out. They don't hand it to me. Right? And so, in that sense, like, even if it came down to a point in which that you had to give change, it could even doing cash sales, if you had like a change transaction, it could very well get down to the point that the change portion of it would come out digital to, a digital wallet or to your debit card or something else, because you just simply won't have the coins to do it, but you could still do the transaction in that fashion, giving up that little bit of change, the 75 cents or whatever it is. If you don't have the coins, that could go as a digital portion where the rest of the cash can still be in the system, and eventually that would just deplete away too, right? So take the coins out, leaving just the cash, and then remove the cash as well. All right. The only time I use coins is at the car wash, right? Without coins being used, items will inflate even more, right? Inflation forever. I don't know about that. You know, they won't let deflation happen. Yeah. 140 people watching, 95 likes. Thank you so much for joining in on today's live stream, breaking down some of this Jefferson speech, talking about the communication of the Federal Reserve being 90, well, actually, it was Ben Bernanke who said it, that 98% talk and 2% action. And the more we start to break down these Fed speeches and the understanding of where it is that they are looking to have the monetary policy in relation to the neutral interest rate, we start to learn that their words are far more impactful than their actions are, considering their actions take a year to go, down the road before they fully impact the economy. Understanding it in this fashion is very unique to this channel. Like I said, very rarely are you going to find anybody who is discussing it in this fashion, sharing the links to the speeches. And I'm sorry if I didn't put this particular one in there, but all the rest of the videos I've ever done, I always leave the link down in the description so that you can go and take the information in for yourself. That's really important to understand this in a way that isn't necessarily communicated from somebody else. You can get their opinion, you can get, a good understanding of it, but then going and retaining the information for yourself, actually reading through those speeches. This is the way that you can really internalize it so that you can then act instinctively, like the the subconscious literally takes over, knowing that these economic forces are playing out. And when you see it in real time, it's not something that you're like going back and referencing to. It's something that is just snapping out because it's just like it's built in there now. That's really where I think that the constant communication here on this channel is trying to at least bring the attention to the people that that's a certain aspect of understanding economics that is really unique. Most people are hoping that somebody else is going to deliver the appropriate message. Like, economics is just too much for them. I want to trust this guy. And that is very compromising, right? You don't want to do that. What you want to do is understand it for yourself in a way that when a person speaks, you can say, yes, I agree, or I disagree with that for these particular reasons. And that's where I think like this channel is really trying to focus and get more people to do. Couldn't agree more, Simon. Well, thank you. Love the ear candy. Thank you, All Nighter. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for all the hard work you put into this channel. Not only just being here, but then reading through all those comments as well. All right. Got one channel informed me about offsets. Link it. It works. Who is telling you reset then not going to happen? Very experienced. Scott, you are dangerously sure of yourself. Thank you for posting those links too, All Nighter. I appreciate that. Uh, they are biting the egg orange here. But it makes sense. The rich don't want to be poor and they don't want you to be rich than them. That's not true. That, Scott, I think actually that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I have ever faced, not only for myself, but then also when I go out there and I communicate with people. One of the biggest things that I have ever found from the richest people that I have ever met is that they want everybody else around them to be rich as well. Like I have yet to see any one of them get upset with somebody attempting to get rich and then get richer than them. Like I have never seen anybody in any of the communications of any of the rich people that I have ever met, not only through the Rebel Capitalist, Mike Zuber's conferences, the Silver Symposium, personally knowing them, never once have I ever met a rich person who had that attitude. Every single rich person I have ever met wants other people to be rich too, especially people who they see potential in. You know, if you're feeling like they don't want you to be rich, think about what it is that you're feeling on the inside, because it isn't them. It isn't them who's feeling that. There might be some rich people out there who might say that. All the rich people I've ever met, and I've met a lot of them now too, all of them want you to be rich. Every single one of them does. Right? I've never seen it. I've never met one of them who was just like, man, what we've got to really do is figure out a way to keep these people from becoming rich so that we can maintain our richness. Right? I've never seen that. Not once. Right? And Mel, maybe you're talking about the rich people who are far beyond the rich that I'm talking about. But the rich that I'm talking about is so elevated that if there's anything beyond that, it's meaningless. Right? Rich people are evil, though, bro. Larry Bird, they are. I don't see that, man. Who are you talking? I mean, George Gammon wasn't evil. Jason Hartman doesn't seem evil. Ken McElroy doesn't seem evil. Who else do I know personally? Uh, I don't know. Like I know those three guys pretty well. They don't seem evil at all. In fact, they seem very encouraging and uplifting, and like dude, jump in the game with us kind of people. There's good and bad, your choice. I was joking. Oh, sorry, Larry. I thought you were being serious. That's what's hard about comments and me, and I just kind of just go off on comments sometimes. Sorry, Bird. I appreciate you, man. No, the poor are the majority in numbers of people. Absolutely, they are. There's good and bad, your choice. Zuber. Uh, Not all rich people are evil. Lumberjack, Dion, right? All these guys. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to build careers off of literally giving people the encouragement, the help, the advice, the tools that they need in order to achieve like mass abundance in their life. Like that's literally their stick. That's what they're trying to do. And then for a lot of people, they might find that to be discouraging in a lot of ways. And that, here it is, rich people trying to get even more rich, trying to tell me how to get rich. Yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, they're entrepreneurs. That's what they do. They're not going to do anything without trying to make money. Why else would they do it? That's what they do. That's why come they're rich, right? They do things that make money. Part of that is sharing in the ideas and in possibilities and capabilities and networks in order to make that happen. Like, if you ever been to like Zuber's conference, it's the most amazing thing, man. I mean, talk about like close knit, family oriented feeling almost, in the sense that those people are very much encouraging on the sharing of ideas on how it is that everybody could rise together. Like literally, like right, like they don't want to say, "Hey, man, we got to do things and keep it in secret," right? No, they're like, "Hey, man, here's the secrets. Go for it. This is what I did. You go for it." Not everybody is going to be able to do what it is that one person has done, right? You see them up on stage, they're talking about the way they got it done. That was awesome. That's really cool. Not for me, ain't gonna work, but you had a pretty good idea there. And when I listen to you and you and you and you, and I think about my own current situation and where it is that I'm facing, I'm starting to come up with some ideas on what it is that I can do to try and be in the flow. I may not necessarily do it the same way that the other people are doing it, but I'm doing it in a way, and a way is better than no way, right? All right. You have watched gold go up and down in price your whole lives and make people rich. And you didn't do anything about that. All right. You didn't position yourself during, you watched it go up and down your whole life and you didn't take advantage of that? Oh, are you expecting somebody to come up and say, oh, by the way, here, man, I got this envelope full of advantage for you. What are you doing, man? I mean, you saw it happen and you didn't do anything about it? Come on, you know? Who are you blaming? All right. I am uber wealthy then because my desire is for humanity. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely, a good feeling and thought and belief, out there is to be good to to the rest of the humans that are out there on this planet. And I totally agree with that. Here's the thing that I found the most though. There is no way that I can be helpful and useful to anybody if I am not helpful and useful to myself first. I have to elevate myself if I'm ever going to use any of my skills, my capabilities, or my position to help other people. I have to elevate first, right? If I can't take care of number one, how the hell can I take care of anybody else? That's all there is to it. Like you have to elevate yourself, then you can bring other people on for the ride. You know, uh, greed chokes the poor. I don't know about that. I mean, I don't think I necessarily agree with that. I think people can be greedy and you can see evidence of the greedy people out there, but for some of the most stingiest people out there, I've watched them do some of the most charitable things that I have ever could have possibly imagined. Stuff that was far beyond what it is that I feel that, like what is it that brought them to do that is beyond me, right? And and coming from even some of the like the people who I thought were just cold, like cold hearted or and didn't care about anybody else out there, and then yet they just go and perform this incredible generous act and then nobody really knew about it, right? And that's what kind of gets me. I'm like, what's going on there that causes that to take place where they seem so stingy and so like, nah, I ain't giving no screw those people. They aren't doing it. And then yet turn around and almost in secrecy do a massive charitable thing. Yeah. Almost like they don't want anybody to even know that they did it and that they want people to think that they're stingy and mean. Yeah. It's weird. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, maybe one day I'll figure that part out, but I've seen it. I've seen it and I've seen it more than once. And so I think about that. It's just like, what's going on that occurs? You know, maybe like I said, maybe one day I'll recognize what is happening there and I'll figure that out. Um, we just want to eat and we see other people that want to eat. Processed anything is, but sugar bound up in the whole plants is not bad for you at all. Like Like, I ain't telling you folks to go on sell your shit and stash dollars. I'm saying that if you're poor and got no money, don't go buying gold. Save your money and something good is coming. Save your money and something good is coming. Right? So don't participate in anything that puts you in a position in which that you could have some cash flow. Like don't partner up with another individual in business. Don't do anything like that. Sit around and wait. Like that was my understanding too. Is I used to sit around and wait for something to happen, wait for opportunity, wait for advantage to show up in an envelope. Why is it important to have kids? Is you see faith daily. truly a miracle when human beings win in life. Rich people see that also, which is evil. They prey on the vulnerable. Everyone is trying to save their money. Would you tell a poor man to go buy super inflated gold? Don't buy, like, I'm not sure what you're hitting on there, but if somebody was to tell me, hey man, I have $100 and I really, really, really want to save this $100, but I'm really nervous about, maybe spending it into the future because I might come across a bill that will just kind of force me to spend it. Like, I have no other choice. Or, I might lose it to whatever. I don't know. Right. So you have this $100 and somebody comes to me and says, that's the only $100 that they have. Right. I would tell them, buy a piece of silver. Go ahead. Why not? If it's the only piece that you have, yeah, I would do it. I would buy a piece of silver and I would hold on to it. I would hold on to it because at least then I would have something that was outside of that third party risk. I would have something that I can save. And I would also have something that I wouldn't be able to just spend. And it would be something that I could carry into the future. So to me, having a single ounce of silver and nothing else would be just fine because it isn't worth that much. Like if you're talking $20,000 and I wouldn't dump it all into metals. But if I had $20,000, I might dump $1,000 into metals. Right? I would have no problems having absolutely nothing and having an ounce of silver. Right? I mean, I would have problems, but I wouldn't have any problem being in that position saying, no, I'm going to hold on to the silver. I ain't going to sell it. I'm going to go figure out how to get something to eat and figure out what it is that I need to do to be helpful and useful to something out there so maybe I can get some sort of return, right? Because that's what you really need to do. If you have nothing going on in your life, like zero, you got to be helpful and useful in some way. Volunteering, probably the easiest way to get started. Because you can't get a return from anybody, from anywhere, for anything unless you provide some sort of usefulness, some sort of service, some sort of opportunity for somebody to then gain some sort of like education or item or something from you, right? Like you have to produce something out there. And even if it's just volunteering to sweep the floors or something like that, you're doing something of value. That will start to compound. The more you do it, the more value you start to receive for your value that you're putting out there. And just think about it in that fashion. Don't think about, hey, I'm going to do this so that I can get money. Just think, I'm doing this because I'm somebody who provides value. The more you do that, the more the reward starts to come. The moment that you think, I need to do this in order to get compensated, like I'm not, in fact, if I don't get compensated, I'm not going to do this. Well, most likely you're not going to find any opportunities out there because you're not the one who's initiating being the useful one. Once you initiate it, if you're the one who is being useful and helpful, then the response from that is being rewarded. Right? And not always does it come in the way that you are anticipating. Like if I do this, I should get that, right? But if you do this and you don't get that and you're disappointed from it, there was a problem with the initiation of what it is that you were doing. You weren't really trying to be helpful and useful. You were trying to be manipulative. And I know even on top of that, it just seems very weird and odd to have this sort of mentality towards it. But once you start seeing it, once you do it, then you start realizing, I get how the abundance flows now. It flows because the more value you bring, the more the value comes back. And that's with anything out there. It doesn't matter what it is, And you have to value what it is that you value. Like if you are, even for this channel, for example, right? Like, I would like to think that I am helpful and useful to people out there who are trying to understand economics. To the average everyday person who's never studied it before, hopefully, like, learning it from a working class point of view, like I have tried to share, can be helpful and useful to the people. I truly, honestly believe that. Like, I think that these discussions and the comments that we have and the articles that we post and everything that we do here on this channel is an attempt to try and help other people out there to understand what it is that's happening so that they can better themselves. Like, that is really what I am attempting to do here. The times that I think about the money, it doesn't work. Like, the videos aren't that, don't do that well. They're not well received. They don't make that much money. Nothing of it is really, it doesn't really line up, right? But when I let go of that stuff and I just literally put out a video, just pour it out from the heart, not with any kind of expectations of it or any kind of idea that it's going to be making money or anything, those videos usually do the best. In fact, it's my top videos that have done the best that I almost deleted because I didn't think anybody would like them, because I didn't have any kind of intention with it. I just opened it up and fired off a video and uploaded it, and it took off. And I'm like, whoa, what did I say in that video? I mean, I don't really remember making the video. In fact, I think I wasn't really thinking about anything at all when I did the video. Huh. And that was the most popular one. I wonder why. No intention, right? No intention to make money, no intention to get views, no intention on any of it. But I did pay attention. I paid attention to it. I wanted to do it, but I didn't have any importance. So those are the keys, all right? Pay attention to intention minus the importance. I wanted to put out a video. I wanted to put out a good video. That's it. I didn't want to put out a video that got a lot of money. I didn't want to put out a video that got a lot of views. I didn't want to get a video that did. I just wanted to put out a good video. That was it. By putting out a good video, I was rewarded for doing that. Those types, those are the best ones. Trying to get into that state can be very difficult for me at times. All right? Well, especially when I'm thinking, oh man, how do I get, video views aren't doing that well. Last video didn't do that great. How do I do a video that gets a lot of views? And the moment that I think that, it's broken. It doesn't work. All right? So today, as I'm going through Jefferson's speech and I'm looking at this and I find that briefcase analogy and I'm thinking, a briefcase? Like a fat briefcase means they're going to cut and a thin briefcase means that they're not. So like that is the exact information that is being deployed now, right? It's just much more complicated and much more spread out. But ultimately, the idea of that thick briefcase as opposed to a thin briefcase, preemptive to the actual cut, so people could actually move before the actual cut was based on that idea. That was beautiful. I mean, I saw that and I'm thinking, man, the viewers have to see this. They have to relate to this or look at this, concept of what it is that Jefferson is talking about, because it totally relates to what it is that the credible threat theory is talking about today. When I saw that earlier, I thought, okay, I'm going to make a video about that later. In the meantime, I'm going to go do something else. So the family and I, we went and picked some chanterelles up in the woods. Did okay. We found more driving down the roads and saw them on the side of the road than we did actually in the woods picking. So we went into the woods and hiked around, but we really didn't find that many. Driving up into the woods and driving back out of the woods, we found a bunch of them just on the side of the road. So it was easy hunting today for chanterelles, and that was a lot of fun. And when I got back here, I thought to myself, okay, just get into a clear mind and try and deliver the information from the heart as best as you see it, unrehearsed, unedited, unscripted. Just give the information. Right? That's what we do. All right. If Father knows unconditional love, yep. Oh, that's good. I mean that you quit. Yes, I still smoke soma. Papers. Okay, having a big family is the key to being wealthy. LeBron James and Donald Trump proves it. Like Germany. All right. Well, some days it feels like I'm more alive than others because of the death. But yes, I died to myself. I died to drinking and partying. Find yourself when you stop living for yourself and you live for another, you feel content. I'm a virgin for weed and liquor. Man, that is awesome. I wish I could say something like that. I wish I could go and say something as cool as I've never done drugs, I've never drank, I've never done, a lot of the stupid stuff that I've done. Oops. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to get my battery set up here. Oh, wow. Why are you guys upside down? All right. Put you over there. I don't know what happened there. My phone's starting to die, so I'm going to have to scroll like this for a second. Okay. Appreciate the hard work you eat. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Larry Bird, man. I really appreciate the support for the channel. With the super chats. I see we have another one. Did I miss that? Oh, no, that was the one that we already done. Right? God, look at all these comments. You guys are so rad. All right. Oops, Trump's latest tweet will tell you where our country is headed. I don't trust anything Trump says anymore. I just don't. I never trusted Biden. Not even so much that I wouldn't even listen to a single word he said. I had zero trust for that dude. Not that he had anything to say anyway, of importance. I had at least some hope, but I just don't anymore. I had at least some idea that there might be something buried deep down in there, but now that I recognize what it is that's totally taken place, I have very little doubt in my mind that Trump is totally on the side of the Federal Reserve. Those guys are best friends forever. All right. Like the sands in the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. All right. I don't have Twitter, not cool, not a celebrity. Alrighty, guys, I'm gonna call it quits. My phone is dying, my battery, because I used it on my tablet here. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the support. I really appreciate it. And I'm really, again, I know I said it earlier in the video, but I really am hoping for this channel, and at least for my mindset when I deliver this information, is that I'm trying to be helpful and useful to the average everyday person to get that understanding of what it is that's taken place so that they can be making that appropriate decision for themselves. And that's not necessarily easy to do, considering the massive amounts of noise that is out there, and trying to deliver information that is consistent, that doesn't sound like it's just straight up contradictory to all the mainstream media, New World Order, misinformation stuff that is being deployed out there. Not that saying that everything is misinformation, but dang, when it comes to monetary policy, what they deliver out there on the mainstream media is not consistent to what it is that you can find within their own words of the FOMC. And this is where I've been trying to share for quite a while now, on how it is that they are using credible threats, how they use job owning, forward guidance, signaling, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, they're trying to control that narrative, to control the market's expectations, to create the economic environment that they are for, and they have been discussing this for a very long time. But again, very quiet to the mainstream media. They want to talk about interest rate adjustments, but that's really the old tool, not the new tool. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.